Well, hello and welcome back to Read Becca. We're starting a vlog today. It's the 1st of April. It's not April Fool's. This is a real vlog, but it's also the start of People April, the readathon focused on reading biographies and memoirs, real stories about actual people. And I already revealed in my TBR the secret theme for my People April reading was going to be awesome old ladies. And I've been sort of collecting books on this theme for a while and just didn't know what I was going to use them for. And so now this is like the perfect fit. So I am in middle age, just slightly into middle age, and I certainly feel like I'm mentally and emotionally in the best place I have been in life ever before. Maybe not physically. The wheels are starting to fall off physically, but that's pretty normal of aging. But I am increasingly, as a result of feeling much more positive about myself mentally and emotionally, really vibing with positive aging and aging independence, things like that. And so I continue to be drawn towards stories of people who have had awesome older lives. And I think the 3 books that I have chosen for this are all going to fit perfectly. So the book that we're going to start with, I think, today is going to be Accidental Icon by Iris Apfel. Iris Apfel is, as the title says, an icon. She is very famously known for her kind of maximalist and colorful, vibrant style. She's really involved in fashion and interior design, but she didn't really take off and become like a public sensation until into her 60s. And she is just so charming as a person. I've seen lots of interviews of her. And so I'm really excited to read this memoir of hers. You may look at me and think I'm not very into fashion, but I love fashion. I really like anything that's kind of the joining point of artistry and technicality, like technique. And I think she's a little more on the chaotic side, but I love the way that chaos just works. And so I love that. I do absolutely enjoy fashion. So I'm really curious to see her take on her personal style. So I think that's going to be my main focus reading today. However, I do also have a buddy read starting that's not related to this readathon or this vlog. So I'm buddy reading Touch Not the Cat for April, and that will be jumping right off today as well. So I'll be probably splitting between those 2 books. But let's see what I think of my beginnings into Accidental Icon.
When you get older, as I often paraphrase an old family friend, if you have 2 of anything, chances are one of them is going to hurt when you get up in the morning, but you have to get up and move beyond the pain. If you want to stay young, you have to think young. Having a sense of wonder, a sense of humor, and a sense of curiosity, these are my tonic. They keep you young, childlike, open to new people and things, ready for another adventure. I never want to be an old fuddy-duddy. I hold the self-proclaimed record for being the world's oldest living teenager, and I intend to keep it that way. Everyone's being a little snoozy this evening. Gumbo's in my filming chair. Poor Ripley has absolutely no comfortable places to lay, so she had to lay on the stick of this ribbon wand. And Rue is enjoying his window seat. So I will situate you guys here, possibly, so we can see Rue. So I finished the book, Accidental Icon. And I really enjoyed it. I think that it was a great balance of things. Like this
I'm going to have a struggle reading it because I think it's right between a 4 and a 5, probably 4.5 star, really, because it is so light and slim as a memoir. It feels like a mix of things that's really interesting. Iris Apfel keeps sort of changing the form to do whatever she is wanting to. So at points, it feels much more like a coffee table book. At points, it feels like it's inspirational quotes speckled through. At other points, it feels like traditional anecdotes you would get in a normal memoir. Then it changes to an email from her to the readers, a list of things, like she has 10 suggestions or rules for a healthy marriage, but all of them feel extremely genuine, unlike a lot of those types of books that you would get. So she has this sense of heart that's in her writing, I think, that just shines through. And so many of those things, like the motivational quotes, do feel a little like quippy, but they don't feel trite and fake the way you often get. So I just really enjoyed this, and I love her sense of fashion. I love the stories that she told because, being a memoir, like the anecdotes are so many wondrous things. Like, she's talking about this lengthy history. She and her husband had an amazing, amazing life. She met him, he was a buyer for like haute couture at an old department store, and in the heyday of that. And they met, and he immediately was won over by her fashion. So she's always been this really stylish, fashion-forward woman. And then they ended up sort of creating a textile and fabric company. And that was her job for the longest time. And she ended up doing fabrics for the White House for like 40 years and just having all these amazing encounters with people and traveling all over the world. But it wasn't until even her late 60s that she got this more national and international fame in the fashion world. And that's amazing. Like, she had this great growth where she was just kind of always this fabulous, stylish, older lady for the longest time, or really through her whole life, she was a stylish lady. But that got some notice and then finally got picked up by the fashion world. But it didn't start with the sort of public fashion world. Professionally, it started with museums. Like, museums took note of her and showcased her, and then the traditional commercial fashion side of things picked her up. And so that wasn't really even till she was in her 90s that she was doing that. And so she had this long, wonderful, colorful life, so full of things, and she talks a lot about that. Since aging is kind of her topic that she really talks about, and having gained all of this fame and success as an older woman, she talks about staying young a lot. She talks a lot about there not being a secret, but surrounding herself with people who are really varied and living life to the fullest, filling up your life rather than trying to prolong your life. And she just has such wonderful, wonderful thoughts. So I just really, really appreciated this. I think it's one that will stick with me, not necessarily as like, this was my favorite thing ever, but I think so many of the moments and quotes, like I highlighted so much out of this book. I highlighted so much because there were all of these short little bits that really are going to hang on with me and really be meaningful to me. So that's book one down. So I am going to watch the film probably next, and then I have some other things to read before I jump into the next thing. But actually, this was the only one that I have in print, or I had it in ebook, obviously. But the other two I have on audio, which I do kind of prefer for memoirs. I think they are both narrated by the authors, so I appreciate that. But I will check in next after watching the documentary, and then we will get on to the next book after it.
You ever thought about having plastic surgery?
Oh, God, no. Oh, I'm very opposed to that. And I think unless God gave you a nose like Pinocchio, or you were in a fire or some terrible thing, why mess? Because you don't know how it's going to come out. You could come out worse than when you started. I mean, some very important people I know, they come out looking like Picasso. It's not why? What do you want to do, for a few wrinkles? I see no reason for it. I mean, maybe people in show business are obliged to look young or something, but everybody knows how old you are, and you have these scrawny old hands. Don't go with your face, and you start to fall. Some people start to fall down. No.
On their occasion, I would comment on their comments.
He'd tell me that people would say, well, who is she? And they'd say, oh, I don't know, she's dead. So I told him, the next time you hear that, tap the lady on the shoulder and say, my auntie is very much alive. She's just walking around to save funeral expenses.
Well, that was a wonderful documentary. I really enjoyed it. And it got across a lot of the same things. I think there was definitely an overlap, even in some of the stories told, but there was also a lot more that it exposed. I think that it really got across Iris's sense of how much she sees curiosity as important and is always striving toward joyfulness and fun. And that has kept her young. So I think that in the book versus here, we get so much more line of sight into her talking about that. And we see so many scenes of her with other people and also in her home. And just the sense of surrounding herself with joy and curiosity is really, really present there. I think she talks a lot about how some people really lean on beauty and how she's never really been beautiful or aspired to be beautiful, but she's looking for that sense of things bringing her joy and fun, and the sense of her cultivating a style of her own that continually is enriching her with that sense of joy. So it becomes a self-serving cycle, really, of joyfulness. And I loved the way that's explored. We also get these moments in her home where you realize it's just surrounded with toys. And people talk about the fact that she and her husband have like Christmas stuff up 6 to 8 months out of the year. And it's just such a wonderful, it's very cluttered, but there's a lot of fun stuff. Everything that she has found and discovered that over time she thinks back about all these great memories things bring her. It's just so great. So great. So there was that wonder in everything that she does, I think. And then I think that also there was such a wonderful sense to her life and how she has stayed young through that. With both her and her husband, Carl, they live to be over 100. And yet they feel young. You're watching them as they're getting older, and she's talking about having hip surgery and all of that. And just the playfulness throughout is so wonderful. So I just really, really, really loved this documentary. It was great. So now we are onward to the next book, which is actually How to Be Old by Lynn Slater. And funny enough, I had not realized this when I picked it, but her blog is actually includes the title Accidental Icon. So she has some very significant overlap here with Iris, whose memoir is named Accidental Icon. But similarly, Lynn is also a fashion influencer, sort of. She has shifted gears, I believe, in older life and gotten really into fashion. But her style is pretty much the opposite of Iris's, I think, where she's really minimalist and does a lot of like tailored, sleek lines, black and white, that kind of thing. So very, very opposite of Iris. So I'm curious what overlap there will be in their memoirs of them talking about aging. So anyway, let's dive into that, and I will check in once I've gotten some way into the reading. I've got about halfway through How to Be Old, and I just wanted to check in because this one is by a lot the longest, I think. It's still not very long, but it's like 9 hours on audio. So about halfway, it's feeling like a very standard memoir. So I'm enjoying it, but it's not sort of standing out or blowing me away in any way. I feel like it's a mix that she is combining vulnerability and the sort of trite quotations and very like inspirational things that she feels like she should say. So there's a sense that it feels a little bit forced, I think. But I am liking it. Like, I think she is trying to convey wisdom, and also trying to get across the point that she's had this great thing happen to her where she decided to change gears at 60 years old, basically, and actively pursue a career in fashion, going from social work to fashion. Very big change. But it also seems like she was very privileged before, and so she's really conscious of that, especially coming from a social work background. And there's this moment very close to where I paused for today, where she mentions realizing after having some success with becoming an influencer and feeling weird about that just generally, but particularly taking the step back to recenter herself and really process what's going on in her life, that she had all of these ideals about wanting to influence social change and perceptions as someone who's older getting into fashion, and having a lot of thoughts about that, and then realizing that she has just sort of fallen into the capitalistic side of influencing, where she's become a brand and she has a lot of items that are sent to her by different people who want to promote their stuff. And so she's just got this pile of things, and she's not really putting a lot of thought into picking and choosing the brands that she would like to put forward because she likes them as brands and she likes their sustainability or their message or can do something to push forward something really positive. Instead, it's become very transactional. And so I don't yet know where she's going from there and if she's going to find the line that she wants to walk with that. But it's interesting that she's consciously considering that at this point in the book. So I'm really enjoying it, though. It's, I think, not going to be anything that super sticks with me right now, but I'm curious to see where this goes. And if it does go into more vulnerable territory in the back half, I think it could be a standout. So we will see.
Gumbo, why are you attacking my plant? Hey, that's not for attacking.
So we seem to be finally through the weather that will have cold overnights finally, and I was able to clean up my plants that have been in the house, surviving through winter. Not thriving for sure. I think that's true though, and pretty normal for plants, that they kind of get scraggly and depressed over winter regardless, but they lived. That's about all I was hoping. So there was a lot of trim back. All of these do have sort of long trailing viney type bits to them, but are very much trimmed back, so that's not really visible for now, but they are alive, they are now outside, and hopefully they will now spring forth and look great in a couple weeks. All right, well, I finished up How to Be Old by Lynn Slater, and I have to say it was kind of just fine. I expected up front, it kind of turned out to be a very standard memoir. I think she lost me a little bit in the end because she started talking about having the success and people pursuing her to promote her online writings and her presence there as an influencer by pushing the fact that she is kind of an older influencer and that becoming a category of person, and her just really, really not liking that, not being or not wanting to be put into a box with other people and wanting to be treated like an individual, to the point that it felt like she went on like an hour-long rant about not wanting to be labeled a senior, and it being entirely about that, while loss of individuality and being categorized. And I was like, okay, it's fine to, mention that you don't like this, but just the volume about that felt really off. And it was a little strange because to me, she was talking about these companies pursuing her and wanting to lift her up as this older person who was getting attention, and her really having a distaste about the way they're going about that. And I mean, maybe I'm overly cynical, but I feel like in capitalism or with corporations, like them doing the right thing, even if it's for the wrong reasons or in the wrong way, like, is about all I expect. Like, that's the most positive I expect of them. So even though they're going about it in a way she doesn't really like, they're doing something that is actually really positive. And that's disappointing to me that she was so, like, overtly against these companies doing that. It was just kind of like, I want them to be holding up these older people and making them more visible. And she was just really turned off. Anyway, so that did not love, and that was very much toward the end. So it's kind of a sour note to end on. What I did like in the last bit that I think I haven't talked about before is she talks even more about the continued self-reinvention that she goes through, and whether that's conscious or not conscious choices. She talks about kind of another renewal about 68 years old, where she and her partner really made big changes in their lives, and that was conscious. And then she also talked about frequently changing her hair more often as a mini sort of self-reinvention. And I really, really like that. And I connected with that. I don't change my hair as much as I used to. I used to always have very brightly colored hair, and I would change styles. I would cut it all the time. And it's been kind of similar or samey for a long time in the past, probably decade, mainly just because I don't like putting the effort toward it anymore that I used to. And I keep thinking about wanting it to be super short, because I really love having very, very short hair, but not feeling like the level of effort for that is much more significant, and the upkeep of having to cut it constantly. Like every 6 weeks, you really have to get your hair cut if you want to keep it short. So yeah, the upkeep of that is an effort, and I don't feel like I want to put effort toward that. But thinking about that and how I do put effort toward other things, a lot of them are just more internal rather than external. But I liked that the book made me think about that. So I think that what her point was in getting that across is that being curious and continued self-reinvention, being flexible to do that in your life rather than getting stuck in ruts, is really a key to having a positive elderly life, to growing old with sort of class, I would say, not in the term of classism, but with a certain self-value that you inherently create for yourself. So that one, I enjoyed it as a memoir, but it was not a standout, I don't think, and just kind of felt like a standard memoir. Then, because I finished that on my drive to my weekly game, I started up the next and final book in this vlog, and that one is Still Life at 80 by Abigail Thomas. And this is an author I really didn't know anything about, but now realize she has some really popular previous books, and is a dog lover. Yay! So I think I may need to get to her book about dogs. But this one is really interesting, and it started strong out of the gate because it directly connected to what I was just talking about with the previous book, where she also touched on, very briefly, rather than in a long rant, about disliking the term senior, and talks about it from the perspective of it having a negative social connotation and cultural connotation, and preferring the term elder, things like that. And so I felt like she was getting her point across. She was feeling similar things, but it was less about herself and less about not wanting to be categorized and put in a box, and more about the ways that we perceive these terms and wanting to change those social perceptions that you can do by using different language. And I really liked the way that she framed it versus the previous framing. So interesting. This is also very different in that it is a memoir, but this is much more like brief glimpses and reflections than it is really lengthy anecdotes. So this is only 4 hours on audio. So I think I will be blazing through, though I'm not going to try to, because if it is just short, brief reflections, I want to really have time to linger on those and think about them. So I will probably check in with you for my final wrap up when I finish this book. well, we have reached the end. I finished Still Life at 80 by Abigail Thomas, and I think this was my favorite of all three. So it is a memoir, and I think I mentioned this when I started. It's been a few days, but it's a memoir that is told in very, very short, like musings, more so than anecdotes. And they are stories from Abigail's life, it seems, but it's not about the story. It's much more about what she's thinking and feeling about what's happening. So experiences of aging and being over 80 and experiencing brittle bones that break very easily and increasing loss surrounding her with her pets, with people she cares about. So there are some real sad moments there in dealing with the end of life, but there's also a lot of humor, not like silliness necessarily, but she talks about getting her first tattoo at 60 and finding that meaningful to herself and the process that she went through. But it's much more, again, about the internals of what she's feeling about that moment. And I really like that introspection to this one, where the previous was a much more like anecdote-ridden, very external memoir. And this one was much more just about her processing the feelings of aging. So that was really what I was looking for. I thought that the writing was really engaging despite it being so mundane. I mean, the title gives away that it's going to be very, very mundane, and it is, but yet it's very heart-wrenching and full of emotion, without being dramatic or melodramatic. And I liked that. I really enjoyed her take. It also had a snippet at the end that was a sample of another of her books. I think I would enjoy reading some more. It seems like she writes mainly these kind of short memoirs, so I think I would read more from her in the future. So this was a delight. That is my reading for People April on awesome old ladies or positive aging, and I feel like I got a lot out of the books, even though there wasn't any necessarily specific advice about life. It was more of a general guidelines for keeping yourself young, for being positive about these changes that are happening in your life as you get older, and ways to think about it. It was much more about framework, I think, that I took away than any like specific executable advice that I could implement in my life. It was just keeping that mindset of always being curious, always being flexible, and being willing to change and grow as you age rather than getting stuck in ruts. And I think that was super valuable to reinforce and remind myself of, because it can be very, very easy to get stuck in a rut for sure as you get older. So with that, I'm so happy that I got to do this for People April, and it was just such a good time. So I will say thank you so very much for watching.